Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating work by psychoanalyst Piera Aulagnier called The Apprentice Historian and the Master Sorcerer. And it gets right to the heart of one of the biggest questions we can ever ask ourselves. Seriously, just think about that for a second. Who's the author? Is it you? Your parents? Maybe it's just your memories, right? Or is it something else? Well, Aulagnier has this incredibly powerful answer that, yeah, it might just change the way you think about who you are. Okay, so Piera Aulagnier, she was this trailblazing French psychoanalyst, and she put forward this pretty radical idea. Our sense of self, our I, it isn't just something we have, it's a story, a history that we are actively building all the time, piece by piece. She came up with this brilliant name for this job we all have, the work of the apprentice historian. You know, we're all apprentices, trying to make sense of all these scattered clues from our lives. Little bits of memory, stories our family told us, feelings that just pop up. And we're trying to weave it all into a story that makes sense. A story that lets us say, yeah, this is me. But this is where her work gets really interesting. What happens when the very materials you're using to build your story are, well, what if they're broken? What if your past is just, as she puts it, a place of silence and fury? So to really dig into this, Aulagnier introduces us to this profound and really mysterious case of a patient she calls Philippe. Now, Philippe comes to her and his personal story is just a complete wreck. He has, in her words, a childhood without a history. And right here, you can see the core of his problem. On one hand, you've got the official story from his parents. Everything was great, happy childhood, you know the drill. But on the other hand, you have Philippe's own reality, which is just this chaotic storm of contradictions, huge gaps in his memory, and these bizarre, illogical connections that make absolutely no sense. And just listen to how Philippe tries to put the pieces together. This is a direct quote from him. The logic is just scrambled. He's trying so hard to build a history, but the building blocks are all wrong. He's an apprentice historian, but he's working with nothing but ruins. His story gets filled with these huge mythical figures. He's not just Felipe anymore. Now he's got a direct line to Satan and Saint Peter. You see, when a real coherent story is missing, the mind will scramble and create this mythological one just to try and hold itself together. So at the end of the day, Philippe is suffering from what Aulagnier would call a catastrophic failure of history. Without a reliable story to anchor him, his whole identity has just shattered. And that's the puzzle that he and the analyst have to somehow solve together. So, how in the world do you start to rebuild a history from that kind of wreckage? Well, this is where Aulagnier brings in her key ideas, the tools for this really delicate kind of psychic archaeology. And the most important tool is something she calls the identifying discourse. Now, that's just a fancy term for the healthy, life-giving story that we're all meant to be writing about ourselves. It's the narrative that makes sense of our past, connects it to today, and lets us even imagine a future. It's the very foundation of who we are. And for Philippe, that foundation is completely gone. And here's where the master sorcerer part of the title comes into play. See, the analyst's job isn't to walk in and say, okay, Philippe, here's your real story. That would just be another story forced on him from the outside. No, the analyst's job is to be a guide, to create a safe space and ask the right questions to help the apprentice historian, Philippe himself, find the lost pieces and start that slow, hard work of building his own truthful history. But then Aulagnier had this incredible insight. She realized this whole struggle over who gets to write the official story, it's not just happening inside our heads. It has a massive parallel out in the world on a political scale.
Does that sound familiar?
Yep. In the last part of her book, Aulagnier turns directly to George Orwell's masterpiece, 1984. She saw that the party's total control over its people was built on the exact same foundation, complete and total control over history. She drew this incredible line between the delusional story of a patient like Philippe and the totalitarian newspeak of Big Brother. She saw they were basically two sides of the same coin. Both are about replacing a complex, true history with a fake, simple one that only serves the needs of some controlling power, whether that power is a broken part of your own mind or a political part. And the stakes here are just massive. You see, for an individual, when history gets erased or twisted, the result can be psychosis. For a whole society, it leads to totalitarianism. So what this all means is that the struggle to tell a true story about yourself is literally a struggle for your own sanity. And the fight for a true history of a people, that's a fight for freedom. So this brings us back to the hope that's really at the heart of all of Aulagnier's work. Because if a false history can be so destructive, well, it means that creating a new, more truthful one can be incredibly powerfully liberating. Aulagnier's work really maps out this journey. It starts by facing that old story head-on, admitting where the gaps and the lies are. Then you can start to deconstruct that false story that caused all the pain. And only then can you really begin to author a new history, one that, for the very first time, actually unlocks the possibility of a future.
Aulagnier calls this ultimate goal potentiality. It's that psychic state where the future isn't already written for you by the ghosts of a broken past. It's an open road. It's the freedom, earned through the really hard work of rebuilding your history to finally write your own next chapter.
And this leaves us with such a powerful idea. The past happened, sure, we can't change that, but its meaning isn't set in stone. We have the power, and Aulagnier would say we have the responsibility to be the ones who interpret it, to be its historian. So that brings us right back to that first question we asked, but now it has a whole new weight to it, doesn't it? The story of your life is being written every single day. And Aulagnier's work is a challenge to us all to pick up the pen and consciously, bravely take on the job of being its author. What story are you going to write?